Some huge news out of the NHL Draft Combine is potential first-round pick Sasha Poirier sheds some light on some of the crazy interview tactics used by Kent Hughes and the Habs. We're getting into that. Plus, Kaiden Lindstrom is not fully participating in some of the medical testing, including some other OHL players who are also skipping out. We got to get into all of that coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. But Jesse, I wanted to talk about something first, and it has to do with new Habs goalie signing Connor Hughes. And Connor Hughes, as you guys know, was signed to come over from Lausanne in Switzerland for the Montreal Canadiens. And well, there's a very interesting story behind him, and we'll shed some light on it here. Connor Hughes, over the past few years, some of his goalie coaches have included Cristobal Huet, Habs legend, and David Abisher, Habs legend. And another coincidence, Jesse, is Cristobal Huet. He was also 27 when he came over to the NHL from the Swiss League, which is absolutely insane. This is from Marc-Antoine Gaudin's article for CBC today. I'll link that down below. Jesse, how crazy is that not only did Connor Hughes have these ex-Habs as coaches, but he's following an extremely similar path to Cristobal Huet, a guy who's very near and dear to our hearts. This is such an amazing story.
Right? And it's par for the course, right? Sometimes these goalies, they take a little bit longer to develop, but they're here now, and that's what really matters. And you know what? I was sad to see Cristobal Huet go. I loved him during his time here in Montreal, but it's so nice to see him training the next generation of Laval, and dare I even say, possibly Montreal goalies in the future. Now, Connor Hughes has really worked hard for this opportunity, and he really deserves it, right? But it's so nice to see that he's really been getting the help from the pros to really get there, right? But it's just so interesting when we see the stars just kind of aligning here. You know, it's obviously looking like more of a depth move, and that's just going to be huge for us for just having that Laval Rocket crease. It's a little bit more solidified, but I mean, he is a welcome addition to the organization as a whole.
It's going to be crazy now. Obviously, that's what people are assuming, but I am seeing some Habs fans say, you know what, that's it. I've seen enough. Trade one of Primeau or Monty to move up in the draft. I'm not ready to go that far, but it is really, really cool. Cristobal Huet had so many high praises for Connor Hughes. It's going to be amazing to see what he can do in North America. But Jesse, we're going to quickly move on to the next topic. So we got some spicy draft combine updates coming out today. And the first one, well, it has to do with some injuries. Now, there's a couple guys that have been on the Habs radar. We've heard a lot about Beck Seneca. We've heard a lot about Kaiden Lindstrom. But as of today, Jesse, Marco D'Amico, as he's quote tweeting Mike Morreale saying that Zane Parekh wasn't going to do full workouts, he said he joined the likes of Kaiden Lindstrom and Beck Seneca as players not doing full testing. Kaiden Lindstrom not doing full testing, Beck Seneca not doing any at all. Now, Parekh is because his season went a bit longer, of course, with the Memorial Cup. He could be picked by the Habs, probably not. But Lindstrom, of course, we know his history with back issues. At least he's there doing a bit, which is good. But Seneca was injured in the playoffs. Do you think this has much impact on what the Habs might do, Jesse? Because, you know, hearing that Lindstrom is not going to be doing full testing, to some people they're saying, uh-oh, like maybe another red flag. But to some others, they're kind of saying, well, it's really his medical history that's going to tell us the story, not really what he's able to do when he's still trying to rehab from it. Seneca, I feel like, is not really concerning to me, but I feel like he might not jump up as much as some people were thinking. You can love his talent in the world, all his talent in the world, but this physical testing can often shift prospects around at the last minute. Well, I guess a few weeks before the draft, and to see him not doing anything, I think maybe some teams either might end up sleeping on him too much or maybe reach for him too much. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting update.
I feel like with Beck Seneca, like the Habs know what type of player they'd be getting him. Big, strong, physical type of player, right? But every last little bit of information they get is going to be absolutely crucial for the Montreal Canadiens going forward, right? So I'm happy to see that at least Kaiden Lindstrom will be doing some testing, right? Because Kent Hughes is going to have to keep an eye at this draft. It's a little bit different. Like they're going to have to be paying attention to far more players just because of the movement that can kind of happen prior, right? So all the information that you can really get when you're having to look at this many players is really going to help the Montreal Canadiens quite a bit.
It's going to be kind of crazy because I was hoping to see what Kaiden Lindstrom could do. And while he's still going to be doing some stuff, I'm not sure when the update came out that he wasn't going to be a full participant, but just to hear that he's doing anything is kind of good news for him, I think, as opposed to Seneca, where it's like, I just wish I could have seen. But like, you understand, these guys have injuries. It is what it is. But you raised an interesting point, Jesse, about how Montreal's going to have to look at a lot of different players. And there was another piece of news that came out today about another guy that is going to be picked in the top 5, and that's Artem Levshunov. Not a guy necessarily that Montreal's targeting, but check this out. So Anthony Maltino tweeted today that Levshunov said that he's seemingly had a lot of interest come in from the Blackhawks, said they talked to each other, the Blackhawks and Levshunov, a lot this season. He said today he spoke to the Habs for the first time here at the Combine. Now that, to me, Jesse, is a pretty strong indicator that the Habs don't really have any intention of picking Levshunov, or maybe they just think he'll be certainly gone before their pick, because I think you'd be crazy to not at least consider him. But I think this gives us some real more insight into who the Habs might pick. But not only that, we got to not forget as well that Artem Levshunov is mocked to go at number 2 in this draft by a lot of people. And people are saying that depending on who Chicago takes, whether it's Levshunov or whether it's Ivan Demidov, if they pick Levshunov, Demidov probably will fall to the Montreal Canadiens. So this little bit of information says a lot about who the Habs might pick. What are your thoughts on Levshunov only meeting for the Habs the first time today and what that could mean for their draft pick?
Absolutely. You have to feel like the Habs are really narrowing in on the players that they know they have a possibility of getting, which for me is great, right? You know, you can't, there's so many players that they have to pay attention to. Any players they feel is not going to really come to them. Obviously, they need to be focusing on where it really matters, right? Like, you have to feel like this draft is going to be coming so quick. Kent Hughes is going to be at that draft table before we know it. You have to feel like Kent Hughes, he'll probably be the ones doing the honors, you know, this year and everything else, right? But this is amazing news because it just increases the chance of either a Lindstrom or a Demidov, you know, most likely a Kaiden Lindstrom slipping to us. That's the big caveat. We need some of these defensemen to go first. So to hear that they've been speaking all year, Levshunov and the Blackhawks, and not only that, but it seems like they have a really great relationship, right, is a good sign, you know, is a really good sign for the Montreal Canadiens getting a very skilled forward at this draft.
It's going to be so cool to see what happens. So yeah, it certainly seems like the Habs are definitely not going to trade up for a defenseman like Artem Levshunov. I think they're pretty convinced he's going to go in the top area. And even these little things like this, who teams interview, who teams don't interview, who they've met with throughout the season and not only will that tell you who the team might be targeting, but it might also give you some insight as to what other GMs are thinking, because the Habs at 5 are not even interviewing a guy that could be a franchise-changing defenseman. That might tell you that he's certainly going to go in maybe the top 3 or 4 based on other scouts. So, hey, there's a ton of information to come from there, but we'll keep you updated on that whole Demidov situation. But the final thing in today's video, Jesse, is maybe my favorite thing today, and it has to do with the Habs interview strategy. Now, if you guys are familiar with last draft, David Scott, University of New Brunswick sports psychologist, he has been that crazy guy in these interviews asking some of the most ridiculous questions. You remember when he interviewed Jacob Fowler and how he was kind of that crazy guy? What makes you tick, Jacob? And then that whole question, I believe, to Reinbacher about if he was in World War II and he had to bomb his teammates, all this crazy stuff. Well, he's back, and Sasha Poirier, a guy that's mocked to go about in the 20s in this draft, a guy that I've actually spoken about on stream a couple days ago. Go check that out if you haven't already. He shed some light on it. I'm actually going to show the quote first. He said, "The Habs interview was more intense than many others." Yeah, there's a lot of people in the room. At one point, the psychologist sat down on the end of his chair to challenge my gaze. I did the same. He realized he wasn't going to get me. Now, Jesse, we also have a quote on him talking about pressure a bit after, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on this first. This is definitely David Scott. This is definitely the same guy that was questioning Fowler, that was questioning Reinbacher. It sheds a lot of light on how the Habs are really going after the mental game of players. It's a big reason they picked Slaf and Reinbacher. Getting to know players' psyches is very important for them, but my gosh, it's kind of insane when you hear all these things coming out from players during these interviews.
We got to get the video of this session. You know, we know with the Habs scouts and the analysts, it gets intense, gets a little bit weird. It's almost giving you like, you know, Tom Cruise on Oprah Winfrey kind of type vibes a little bit. But, you know, they're getting the job done, and that's what matters the most for me right now. They're doing a great job, but I think they're doing such a great job, like you mentioned, Josh, of addressing, you know, the mental aspect of the game, maybe from some less common methods as we've seen. But, you know, we saw that picking Slav, a lot of that had to do with kind of that mental part of the game, just, you know, again, with the culture, right? And just that overall sort of attitude. I think that is a really important thing to be checking, especially if you want to have success in the playoffs and everything else like that. So I don't mind them kind of trying some unorthodox methods a little bit and everything else like that. Because for me right now, it is working.
Yeah, I think it is for sure. And, you know, like we said, they want to know where players thrive and they want to get into their heads a bit. And Boisvert, guys, he's a 6'2 center who had, I think, 32 goals and 68 points in 61 games in the USHL for the Muskegon Lumberjacks. He's quite good. But they asked him about pressure as well. And that's something we wanted to talk about. Speaking of the psyche, right? The mental game. He said, pressure? Having to put bread on the table for your family. That's pressure. I play hockey and have fun. There's no pressure in that. Now, I've seen some people kind of react to this in a way that, saying there's no pressure, what's his motivation to get better? You can't just play hockey willy-nilly and not feel the pressure, but I think this is actually kind of a good thing. And the thing is, like, it just comes down to mentality and how much you yourself want to get better. But I thought this was an interesting quote. You could also take, that's kind of how I took it. It's like in these high pressure situations, this guy's going to be one of those guys as cool as a cucumber, right? He's super calm. He's super settled down. I quite like this quote, and I want to hear everyone's thoughts down below as well. What do you think of this quote? What about you, Jesse? Do you take this more in the he's calm under pressure, he could be a lethal player, or more of the, hey, I'm just here to have fun kind of guy, as some people might be taking it?
I think there's two schools of thought on it, but it's about having that balance. I think it's great that he's having this attitude, and that's going to fit in right with Martin St. Louis, right? Who I think exemplifies the right attitude for a hockey player of like realizing it's a game and having fun, because that's so important. That's when you play your best. Like at work, when you're having fun, you're enjoying when you're working. Of course, that's so important. But then there's also the internal pressure that you need to put on yourself, as we see, like Slaf is so big on that, right? And you need to do that to really succeed. But if you do too much of that, you can kind of get in your own game and it can be a hindrance as well, right? So it's all about finding that happy balance. And that's what just makes me so happy about covering the Habs, about being a fan of the team, is that I feel like we have an organization that can really support that and find that happy medium between playing the game, making reads, enjoying the game as it comes, but also just doing that prep work ahead of time. So I feel very confident in our staff there.
You said something earlier, Jesse. I just want to see the video of this. I want to see this come out. We also got news that a documentary on the Habs season is going to come out on Crave at some point this summer, which is going to be cool too. But can't wait to see the behind the scenes come out in a few months about this draft, because, oh gosh, I can't wait to see some of the questions they ask some guys. But let us know your thoughts on all this down below. There's a ton to break down. We actually have so much that we could have talked about today about some other draft combine stuff that we'll save for another day. So you'll want to stick around for that tomorrow, because for now, that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you, everyone, for all your support. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.